Tony, how are you?
Hey, Tony, good morning. Thanks for joining us. How you doing today?
Got it. I'm well, thanks.
Yeah. Um, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today about some of your recent articles. And I have to say, looking back at all the different articles and things you've written throughout the years, you've really spent a career and tried to get into, if you want to call it, really push across the message of disclosure and bring relevant information to the public that a lot of times is locked away by the powers at the Department of Defense and the Pentagon, etc. How did you first get started in all of this?
Yeah, well, first, thank you for having me on, and thank you for noting that and for noticing that. I have had a lifelong interest, particularly in the debris aspect of this UFO phenomena. And it began, well, I'll actually begin at the beginning. I had a particular interest in the Roswell UFO crash and with the debris that was mentioned by so many witnesses at the time in 1947. And in particular, there was one type of debris that was talked about quite a bit that we now call nitinol or nitinol.
Yep.
It's shape memory alloy. That basically when you crush it up or deform it, it can remember its original state.
Yes.
And so many of these people way back had been talking about such an odd thing, and it just kind of stuck with me. And so I decided to do a little bit more digging on it, and actually, along with a reporter friend of mine named Billy Cox with the Sarasota Herald, we filed a Freedom of Information Act request on, or rather requesting technical documents on shape memory alloys that had been developed by a private institution called Battelle Memorial Institute.
Oh yeah,
in Columbus,
we all know
Ohio.
about Battelle,
Yeah.
don't we?
Yes, they had a long UFO history, including with Project Blue Book. Well, it turns out that right after the crash, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, at the time called Wright Field, at the time of the crash, later Wright-Patterson, began to let out contracts to Battelle on novel alloys very similar to the properties that were reported at Roswell with this memory metal potential. And two of the metals that make the alloy, nickel and titanium, need to be treated and processed and purified in very special ways in order to achieve this effect. And I began to see that Battelle was doing this. And I thought, gee, it's very probable that the impetus for their work could be the memory metal that was found at Roswell.
Yep.
And so I actually was successful in getting a FOIA reply back that included what are called phase diagrams or recipes to make these kinds of alloys. And it's pretty clear that before Roswell, those things didn't exist.
No.
And after Roswell, they do. So that's kind of what got me going on this path of the debris and following it through. And then, of course, in the past a few months here, I had another run-in with debris and a Pentagon FOIA.
Oh yeah.
I think your listeners probably know about this.
Oh, we all love Susan Go, don't we?
There we go. Yes, we do, don't we? So I had actually continued this interest and had seen a mention way back in 2017, I think in December, in the New York Times, an article by Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal.
Right.
And in this article, they were talking about a previously covert UFO study or program called AATIP, or Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program.
Right.
And and they had mentioned that there was associated with this program anomalous material that was being held for study by Bigelow Aerospace in Las Vegas, Nevada. And my jaw dropped because that is a pretty big sentence buried within the article. And it didn't get much traction. No one was really talking about it. The fact that apparently there has been UFO debris and it has been recovered, and it is being held for study. So I did initiate, again, a Freedom of Information Act request with the Department of Defense.
Right.
And, it was a pretty unambiguous FOIA request. I don't know if listeners can see it or if you're bringing it up on screen or anything, but it was a pretty detailed request. And I guess you've seen it, of course, Tom.
Yeah, we've covered I covered your last article that you published recently.
That's
about
right.
digging into it deeply in our live stream a couple weeks ago, and covered the entire, if you want to call it disinformation in chief, Susan Go, and all the people who were involved with it, including the project manager you uncovered.
Right, and his name is James Lukowski.
Yeah.
It kind of is a complicated story. It's not an easy one to tell, but I'm pleased that you have done your listeners a service by kind of getting them up to speed on it. And this request was filed in December of 2017, and I had referenced the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program and the warehouses in Las Vegas that were to hold metal-like alloy material recovered from UFOs or UAPs. They now call them unidentified aerial phenomena.
Yeah.
And it was very specific. In fact, I said this could include physical debris recovered by the Department of Defense as residue or flotsam or shot-off material or crashed material. And then I really listed very clearly my request for a physical description, a source of origin of the material, the custodian U.S. government agency, the titles and authors of reports, the names of the contractors, and then the test results on the recovered material. And I didn't get that. I didn't get the, and I didn't think I would, frankly, Tom, the test results that would include like physical properties or chemical or elemental, composition. No more than they would release how to make an atom bomb.
Yeah, absolutely.
But what I did get was very interesting, and I'm probably going off here a little too far.
Not at all.
In the weeds, but I did get 150 pages or more of attached technical reports that were responsive to that request. And I just want listeners to know that at no time did I ever use any other words than UFO or UAP or debris or Bigelow Aerospace.
Yeah.
And somehow, in some way, I don't know how, the Pentagon came back and said, no, this is not, you didn't get UFO information. You got information related to an advanced weapons program. Well, I mean, they're playing with words, and when I read my FOIA request and I read back the reply from the DIA FOIA chief and all the emails that I had and the phone conversations that I had with this gentleman, I'm not quite understanding why folks like John Greenwald, the Black Vault, and others can't see what I'm seeing.
Yeah. If I may, Tony.
We live in a strange world today where up is down and left is right, but I'm in the world of business, and if someone sent me a very detailed communication like this, I would understand it.
Right.
I wouldn't send them back something completely unrelated.
If I could, Tony.
Go ahead. Yeah.
One of the things that I noticed that was kind of missed in your last call with the debrief was that they tried to focus in that the person who was running this program was the legendary Hal Puthoff. But to your credit, Tony, I have to say that James Lukowski is the man, because the way that he was described by Elizondo when he was going out of office when Elizondo was talking about the prior person who held the office before him, that his credibility, his career was destroyed by these folks in the Pentagon on the religious left. That's not Hal Puthoff. His career wasn't destroyed. He's still going. It's Lukowski who really suffered the arm of the religious right.
Well, he sure did, and in fact, I tried to reach out to him, of course, in advance of any kind of publishing about him, and he has elected to not, I think, have anything more to do with all of this. And I think understandably so, too, Tom, as you point out. It's a bigger story than we can even imagine, and you're alluding to some things that are really very big and might be impeding UFO research, and that is a certain group of folks within government that have a difficulty with the extraterrestrial concept, and perhaps have religious leanings that prevent them from pursuing that. And may even make efforts at having others not pursue it. And I don't think they like the conclusions that Lukowski was reaching.
Yeah.
So, he was kind of forced out, and Luis Elizondo sure did reference that quite a bit.
Yeah.
So there isn't a doubt that Lukowski is, in fact, a UFO point person as well as a rocket scientist.
Right.
And we see this historically. I don't want to get too far out in the weeds, but it's not the first time where scientists and folks in academia or even in the private sector have been engaged in both technical research in aerospace, as well as having UFO interests. Yeah,
I just listened. I can't remember the general's name, but a general who was talking about when he was in the Pentagon that he got pulled into a secret file room, and a drawer was pulled out, and they gave him stuff that looked like a bunch of little horsehairs and stuff, but it turned out to be fiber optics and stuff along the lines of fiber optics and integrated circuits and a lot of the technology that's driving everything we have today, including our phones and the devices we're talking on, is all derived from recovered alien technology. Because if you look at the timeline of how fast and everything we were moving along with the advancement of technology all around the end of the 1940s, all of a sudden, boom, it just takes off. And something like that just doesn't happen coming from, innovation and collaboration. It comes from an event. It comes from something that takes place. And it's just a matter of digging through the weeds, per se, to find the information and not getting discouraged, because if you keep on digging, we're going to get to the bottom of it.
Yeah, I also think that one of the very first things that they would try to do would be to look at the materials of construction. They could look at systems engineering and components and such. Likely these are things that are very, very difficult for us to comprehend. But the materials, the things of which this craft was made, is another matter. And I think that's kind of where they began. With the materials of construction. So I think these efforts in material science and engineering very early on in the late 40s are very definitely, they find their impetus in the Roswell UFO crash. But, it's not that easy to discern. It's like, the layers of an onion. When folks like the fellow there at the Black Vault, I think he honestly felt that the word ET in Roswell would be found within these technical reports.
No.
And that's not the way it works in the real world. The compartmentalization and the years that have gone by, even decades that have gone by since particularly the Roswell crash. Many of these scientists are not even aware of the origin or impetus of their work, and they don't need to know it. And that would include Hal Puthoff. But I don't want to get too far in the weeds with that particular gentleman, because he is not the key to this story.
No.
Lukowski is the key, and unfortunately, I don't think we're ever going to hear from him ever.
I wouldn't write that off. I wouldn't write that off. I would say Lukowski, if anything, right now is just on a really damn short leash, and he's signed things, enough things to keep his mouth quiet, and there's more than enough leverage that something like the Pentagon can put on people to say, don't talk about this. Because, look, there's been a lot of disclosures to people as they're getting older, getting near their deathbed, that all the information just starts to flow. And I wouldn't doubt that down the road, hopefully long before Lukowski is going to get near death, is going to go ahead and talk about this, because disclosures coming at us, there's more and more things coming every day. Have you seen the recent clips of they called it the pyramid-shaped UFOs that were flying?
I did. I was stunned. And frankly just saw the night view camera vision
Yeah.
clips earlier this morning, and the pyramidal shape is very interesting to me because, quite honestly, the YouTube videos I see of pyramidal-shaped UFOs looks to me a lot like CGI.
Yeah.
But gee, this is not that.
No.
And so I don't know. Now I'm beginning to rethink some of these other videos I've seen of pyramidal structures.
Well, we have to consider that the area of ufology that we're dealing with is really dealing in the, if you want to call it, right on the realm of national security, as the government wants to call it, and top secret. So whether we like or not, we're dealing with, what information the government doesn't want us to see. So we have to consider that there's actors from the United States and worldwide governments who are out there both collecting information and also putting out disinformation to make it feel like, ufologists, as I put on my tinfoil hat, are nothing but a bunch of tinfoil hat wearing kooks, when the reality, a lot of the stuff we've been talking about is true. So everything that's going on, we definitely have to take with a grain of salt, because the possibilities are just phenomenal. And I have to bring up this pyramid shape again, because this goes back to Aaron von Daniken and what he's talked about in the past and the opportunities that are there and where this could potentially take us, which is just... I can't get the smile off my face.
Yeah, it's incredible. And when you talk about disinformation, misinformation, and the Pentagon in particular, I'd like to know, why is it that if I am so very wrong about all of this, why hasn't the Pentagon spokesperson, Susan Goff, is actually, I think, how you pronounce it, like Koff, but Goff, or Koff.
Right.
Something like that. Why doesn't she get back to me and explain that there was a mistake by the DIA, by her agency, and that the DIA FOIA chief for that agency either misread or in some way misunderstood the meaning of my request, although I can't imagine how that would be, given that it's so clear and there was such a back and forth between he and I.
Yeah.
Why is she going underground, yet she elects to talk to people like... John Greenwald of the Black Vault, which for readers who don't know is kind of a private repository of Freedom of Information Act requests of all kinds.
Right.
And he's been doing this for a very long time, for about 25 years. And, she issued a brief statement to him that this does not relate to UFOs, but rather to a weapons program, advanced program.
Yes.
But, she won't talk to the very person who initiated the request.
Yeah.
I just can't understand it. I also can't quite get through, Tom, how can people look at these materials, the request and the reply and the emails, and are they not seeing what I'm seeing? I mean, was not my request very, very clear? I mean, I just don't quite understand how folks are misunderstanding all of this.
Especially where we have this new FOIA process where it's all being coordinated all through Susan's office, where anything
exactly. You read the last part of my last article on this, that it all goes back to her. And if she refuses to talk to me, I'm left hanging.
Yeah.
And in intelligence parlance, that's called a limited hangout when they do that.
Right.
They don't know quite where to go, and so they just... the person that's giving them the problem, they just let out to hang.
Yeah.
And it's precisely what's happened, so that I'm here, and not that I care even in the least about the social chatter and social media stuff and comments that have been written about me on this. I don't care. I could care very little. I've got other things to do.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it does serve to in some way demean a very important story.
Yeah.
And although, Tom, this story did get, as everyone knows, very, worldwide headlines all over the place, they weren't the most choice media venues.
Right.
We're talking Daily Mail and, Fleet Street and the Latin Press and, this kind of thing, 60 Minutes. And what had happened, I think, is that in the Pentagon, and particularly Sue, doing this, it prevented mainstream media from further pursuing this, and I know this to be true in particular of the Fox network and in a particular program I'll stop short of saying it, but I think we know who the gentleman is that has an interest in UFOs.
Oh,
on
Tucker
that
Carlson,
station.
I'll say it. I
And
mean,
so,
he should bring you,
yeah,
honestly,
and when
he should bring you
something
on.
like a video on the Black Vault on YouTube saying, oh, this FOIA is not all that, and it's not what we think, they stop short, and then it ends. Any interest in perhaps,
Right.
talking with me ends.
Right.
Understandably, because, this fellow's been doing this for 25 years,
Well,
and he's the FOIA expert, right? So
yeah.
I'm just left out here to look like, some crazed individual. And I have to say that, yeah, I do tend to get hot-headed about all this because I feel like I'm a one-eyed man in the kingdom of the blind. It's very frustrating. But I'm so relieved and pleased to hear there are folks out there like you, Tom, and your viewers that get it and can go beyond what's out there and, dig deeper.
That's what it's about. It is about digging deeper, and no slight or anything for the things going on at the debrief. They have their particular method. They have their way. Everyone sees things through a particular perspective. I've just learned throughout the years you have to have a broader perspective to really understand the depth and the breadth of what's going on, because you don't know who you're talking to really on the other end of that line, and more importantly, whether the information that they're giving you from the Pentagon is really up to speed, or what they're giving you is their line of disinformation that they want to have propagated out there. Now, one thing I have to say is...
And you know what, this is the deal. If this is the real difficulty, is that we might both be right, John Greenwald and I. It might very well relate to weaponry and advanced weapons, as well as finding its impetus and origin in crashed UFO debris.
Yes.
Both things can be true and probably are, because what would you do with metals with extraordinary properties that can induce invisibility and change the speed of light and morph? Well, I would say you'd probably go right to the defense applications.
Yep.
In the same way that 10 years after the Wright brothers took off at Kitty Hawk, we had gunnery and likely even other types of weapons on planes.
Yeah.
That's what we did. So in the same way, I think that the material was taken to Wright-Patterson, to the Army Air Force Base, and it's remained there in military application. This material does have its application in weaponry, as well as a lot of other things. And I just wanted to say something about that. Within the material I received, the technical reports, was a maybe 12-page document on nitinol, on memory metal. Incredibly, the material I've been studying for 20 years, this memory metal that was reported at Roswell. Well, in 2021, I get back.
Yeah, they use it in glasses.
UFO test results that include nitinol or memory metal. I was stunned. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, and it's something we have in a lot of glass frames and everything else. It's just kind of memory.
Absolutely, heart stents. Actuators. And people said, "Well, Tony, these reports were out there 10 years ago, and this kind of thing." And this is true for sure. But this happened. The crash, I believe, and the one and only one I believe happened in 72 years ago now, and so that it is a certainty that somehow this the technical information that was gleaned from that is going to bleed into the real world from the black world.
Yeah.
And you'll find it in eyeglasses and heart stents, and that's the whole purpose of it. I mean, that I can't quite understand why folks find that to be. That's the whole purpose, is to benefit, find technical benefit from what's recovered. Now, there are certainly some things I'm sure that are being withheld from us, rightly so, in the name of national security. But other types of advancements, benefit all of us. Health benefits, and whether it's for your eyes or for your heart, it made sense to me. And so again, me being taken to task because some of these were. But interestingly enough, James Lukowski's name was redacted from the FOIA that I received, but the one that was out on George Knapp's website whose name I'm forgetting now, what his new website is, it did have his name on there. So why didn't they want me to know James Lukowski's name? Why did they redact it? You know, it just there were too many very strange things, and I don't want to read into it. But
no, but
that was a strange thing.
But when you're seeing dots that are appearing on the map that you're looking at and the information you're surveying, you have to connect them, because you can't just ignore some of this stuff. You have to look at...
Thank you for saying that, Tom, because that's what I try to do. But, you know, when I do that, then people say, oh, you're just connecting the dots, and maybe they shouldn't be connected. And,
but,
you know.
But sometimes you have to...
Intuitively, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you have to step back and really see the big picture and see what's going on, and I think you've got it. You've got a great view on that, especially that I know the guys over at the Debrief have been doing this for 25 years and such. But didn't you really get started back in the 70s? I mean, you've got a great story here that I'm sure a lot of people haven't heard.
I did as a child.
Can you talk about that for us?
I was actually 12. I think 12.
Yeah.
My father had to help me write it. It was right around when Freedom of Information Act came out, in the under Carter, I believe it was. The Sunshine Laws that he had to make it easier to access that kind of stuff. And yes, my very first request was for information on the National Reconnaissance Office, or NRO.
Mm-hmm.
Incredibly, neighbor friend of mine, a kid that I used to hang with, his dad worked for the NRO, and in fact, I remember I had to get a pen and write it down because I couldn't spell reconnaissance, and it was 12 or 13.
Yeah.
And so I said, well, what do they do? And he was telling me all these incredible things about satellites, and that they can see things, small things on Earth from way up in space, and all this other kind of stuff. And I thought he was out of his mind. So I thought, I'm going to write the government and see if this agency really exists.
Didn't you write the president?
I did.
Yeah.
I did, and I actually got an email back from a general or a lieutenant or something. And, a letter. And, it was just crazy because they denied that such a thing existed.
Yeah.
That the agency even existed. And so and today, of course, we know it's a multi-billion-dollar agency employing thousands, with subcontractors probably up to tens of thousands. These kind of secrets can be kept. And they are, and they can be kept over decades. It's incredible.
But didn't, as a 12-year-old, you get a letter back first initially from the general president's office, and then you got almost, you'd call it a threatening letter from a general?
Oh, yes. There was a second part to that. Thanks for reminding me. I had a warning that I was potentially violating a thing called JANAP, a joint, I can't even remember how it was called JANAP. It was a multi-armed services directive to not report if you were in the military.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really quite, it may still be in effect. It was just extraordinary because I had mentioned that I was a 12-year-old, 13-year-old kid, and they were basically threatening me in letter form and saying, and I can't tell you how upset my mother was about all this. When we got the letter back and everything, it was just, said, what are you doing, Tony? I was a strange kid, I guess. But
but I'm sure,
I think that's where our interest begins, though, as teenage boys, you see the UFO magazines, and maybe you have a sighting, which I did, and that's how that interest is sparked.
Want to tell us about your sighting? I've never heard this one before.
Yes, well, around the same time, 13 or 14, I had seen a craft, silvery thing that was cigar-shaped. This was in the metropolitan New York area, and I couldn't believe it because, speaking of morphing, it began to change shape. And I thought at first it might have been a balloon because, back then they had the Goodyear blimp out a lot, and, it was just flying around. And I thought, gee, what is this thing? And it began to morph and then began to dissolve, completely dissolve, like dematerialize.
Yeah.
And there's no craft of any type whatsoever that would have done something like that. So, that was one of the things that got me going on all of this.
Yeah.
And all this time later, it still fascinates me.
And it's what you're talking about, the behaviors about going invisible, dematerializing, changing shape. Those are all documented facts we have from the 2013 video over the FLIR video from Puerto Rico,
Yes.
where they had the
Yes.
opportunity of a minute 45 of being able to watch this UAP just, swinging around and flying around an airport and eventually going back out to ocean where it came from. But the interesting part of it is we know that these types of crafts employ a gravitational warp field around their particular craft to power themselves, to allow themselves to move through the air, water, space, unencumbered.
Yes.
And as a side effect of that, you get invisibility, you get duplication, you get all these different types of visual phenomena that we see in the eyes that's just basically happening because of the craft itself, using the stuff that it has to go ahead and move around through our space and its interaction with our atmosphere.
Yes, and what's more interesting than that is that what you're talking about are the very things that were received by me in the FOIA request, FOIA reply. They talked about these UFO-like materials, metamaterials, and amorphous metals that can do the kinds of things that you're talking about, that UFOs do, that can be used to slow down light and even bring light to a complete standstill, and that can induce invisibility. And they talk about a meta-mirror technology that looks at the ability to not be picked up by radar or scanning or imaging. Then they talk about compressing electromagnetic energy so that you condense it, so you can make information and energy storage smaller, and their transfer is faster because you reduce the volume. One of the other things they talk about is material that can actually take energy out of the surrounding environment. It's called energy harvesting, where they talked about a vibration of a large amplitude from a small stimulus. All of these things are very UFO-like: invisibility, the morphing metal. Every single point relates to what you were just talking about. So even in that way, the information I received, the technical reports that I got, do in many ways relate directly to UFO-like characteristics. I mean, it's almost incredible. Right down to a T.
Absolutely. And now we have, the U.S. Navy, who back in 2018 started submitting patents. I just have to say this is after the point that we had the information about the USS Nimitz going on and what was happening. We have Salvatore Pais went and put all these phenomenal patents out there for having a fusion reactor the size of a shipping container.
Space-time modification weapon that would make the hydrogen bomb seem like a firecracker.
Exactly.
He's an interesting gentleman, Dr. Salvador Caesar, but he's a former aerospace engineer with the government. And again, there you go. I mean, combining a scientist with a UFO-like thing, it's just another example.
But all the different things he has in his patents that they've talked about align with the behaviors of the Tic Tacs they were observing back then. So it really comes into who are they working with, because you can't come up with all this information and just go plunk, here you go, it works.
I know, but the Naval Air Warfare Center Aircraft Division, NAWCAD, is what he worked at, Dr. Salvador Pais, is that what you said?
Pais, Pais, yeah.
The NAWCAD spokesperson denies that the technology comes from space aliens and says that his theories and concepts are his own, completely his own.
Okay, sure.
But that doesn't mean anything.
No.
I think, this is where the problem is. Like, certainly they're not going to admit it, number one. And number two, the answer may be both. This fellow may have thought along the lines and is in parallel to the UFO technology. In other words, he might have been working on plasma physics or things like this that relate to UFO studies.
Yeah.
So that, again, the study of weaponry and the study of UFOs aren't mutually exclusive.
Right.
And I think this is where the problem is.
Yeah.
Again, especially with this particular FOIA dump that I got.
Yep.
It's coming from a weapons program, yet the guy that heads it up goes to places like Skinwalker Ranch and visits with Bigelow. I mean, it's so bizarre.
Yeah.
It's
all connected.
So, it is. I was just going to say it's all connected, but it's also very deep. And for folks that aren't up to speed like you and your viewers, this all just sounds like gobbledygook.
Yep.
And again, I'm just left out here in the field to hang. It's a very difficult story to tell, and when you have the Pentagon saying, "Oh, he's full of it. It's just weapons programs," then that kind of is the end of the story for many people.
Yeah, but these days there's a lot less trust in the government than there used to be. And
there is. I got to be honest. About 50% of the people I think kind of get this and what I'm saying, and 50% dismiss it.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
But as we get along and it comes out that they have been lying and putting out disinformation and spreading disinformation and discrediting people who were telling the truth just to go ahead and spin their narrative, I think there's more and more people's ears who are perking up to this, and there's a lot more exposure going, I hate to say it, on the mainstream news everywhere, which is a good thing because it's time.
I am wondering if they are trying to I mean, I don't want to sound like a loon here, but are they trying to actively discredit me? Or is it just something they do to people that have challenging FOIAs and just ignore them? Or is it a more active thing? In her statement, she said, we're aware of the social chatter about this. Well, I'm not social chatter. I have a name, And she also says... that we're aware of, basically saying we're aware of him.
Wait a minute, the social chatter, there you go right there. That means they're watching everything on Twitter, they're watching everything on Reddit, who knows what other, Facebook and everything, and there really is a program to collect everything that everybody is talking about. Wow.
Yes. Well, then they're probably delighted with the social chatter between people like John Greenwald and me, and the controversy that all of this has created. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure they're delighting in this because it's exactly what they want.
Right.
I am curious, and to be completely candid, I am wondering, how did I get this material? Was it sent as a tacit admission? Was it sent because someone within the DIA wanted it to get out there? Was it just a sloppy and lazy thing that shouldn't have gone out? I'm still wrestling with that. How did this material get to me? All I can tell you is that in my phone conversations with the FOIA chief of the Defense Intelligence Agency, Steve Tomisky, he said to me constantly, Tony, I know what you're looking for. I'm going to get it for you. And at the very end, the last thing he ever said to me was, I'm very proud of my work product. That's what they call it.
Right.
I'm very proud of my work product, and I think you will be happy with it. And that's the last thing. He has ignored any further communication with me. I'm sure that his boss, Sue, has told him to shut up and not talk to me. And previously, we had a great relationship. I mean, he would answer the phone. He would update me on the status of my request. And then after this was released, and her denial, he just won't communicate with me at all.
Yeah. It's I'm
very curious to me.
Well, sounds like you got a little too far into the weeds and you found something, and
I think so.
They've clamped down any other additional information going out on this. Clearly, it stated that in the emails.
It did. So you read the emails as well.
Oh yeah, of course.
And I think anyone that and I wrestled with including those, but because they are communications between he and I, but they're business related and had to do with the matter at hand. So I elected to include them.
Right.
And I'm glad I did because, as you read through them, I reiterate over and over again, UFOs, UAPs, it just, I don't quite understand how they have the gall to say that it doesn't relate to UFOs.
Right.
What were they not reading that either he or I wrote that relates to anything but?
Right. I mean, and we
I
could
don't get it.
We could put it in the middle and say it could not, but you can't just go out and say blatantly it doesn't, because we're dealing with information coming with the federal government, who's been lying about this for a long time and spreading, disinformation. So,
well, this is it, and I wished I had said this to John Greenwald when I was interviewed by him. If it is a terrible, terrible mistake that they made, and either through laziness or sloppiness or oversight, we're all big people here. Why couldn't he call me up and say, Tony, I made a terrible mistake. That material really did not relate to UFOs. It actually related to weapons, and it mistakenly went through a process and somehow got to you and shouldn't have been presented in the way that it was.
We have to wonder if he's still at that
for him to do that and end all this controversy instantly.
Yeah. We have to wonder if he's still at that position at this point.
Yeah, he is. Yeah. He is. He's been with him for a long time. He's a government guy. We'll see in a year or two where he is, but and he can't hide out forever.
No.
I mean, this is a fellow that, be very candid. He used to answer his phone, and now he doesn't. Now it's always, his voicemail.
Yeah.
And I email him, and he would always reply within 24 hours, 48 hours. I've sent him 2 emails and nothing.
Yeah.
Radio silence, but I don't want to be harassing.
No.
Either, and so here we are. 2.5 months later, 3 months later now, and no more do we know than we did back then. It's a standstill. And so I'm not quite sure where we go from here on this.
Yeah, at least on this particular piece.
Yeah.
I'm sure more stuff will come out over time. My question is for you kind of right now is, where do you see all of us? We've got this big, initial disclosure stuff coming to Congress in June and everything. You've got a lot of history on this.
Hope about that. I mean, let's look at the history of that. Do we still know who killed JFK after Trump released all of the JFK documents?
Well, he kept part of it still classified.
And of course, we're not going to see mention of Carlos Marcello and Santos Traficante and others involved, mafia members and such. There was no mention of that kind of thing. And yet the last House Assassinations Committee, Robert Blakely, said that. The very last official word on JFK was it was likely a plot by the mafia, by organized crime. So that when Trump did the the document dump on JFK sometime last year, I think, or maybe it was the year before.
Right.
I can't quite remember. I was very disappointed that there really wasn't much of substance there.
Yeah.
And I don't hold out hope that it's going to be any much different this time around with UFOs. And the way in which it was folded into the stimulus relief program, just an odd kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Do we know who put that in?
No, I haven't heard.
Was it Rubio? Marco Rubio? We don't know.
Probably. I mean, if anyone, it would be Marco, probably, because that's
I would think
kind of
so.
his realm.
I'm kind of amazed I don't know the answer to that, but a senator or a congressperson had to have included that, and I'm going to look that up, of who decided to include that disclosure, UFO disclosure, in the stimulus relief. Now, that's supposed to come out June 1,
June 20th,
I think?
June 25th, I believe, because they said,
June 25th.
based on the number of days that they said when it was going to come out, it was pointing towards around June 25th. But everyone's already making excuses. Oh, they don't have time or whatever.
Well, what do you think about it? You think we're going to be stunned with what comes out? I think they're going to throw us a few bones, a couple of nice little new videos.
Yeah, I think we're going to, basically we're getting a drop of water in an ocean of information. Yeah. I mean, Senator Harry Reid said it well, that a majority of all the information that we have, nothing has seen the light of day, which means it's there, it's organized, it's able to be easily collected and declassified, but it just comes down to cooperation within the agencies who have it and getting it out for Congress and the public to see. But again, it's been so hush-hush and if you want to call it, taken under to a level of deep state information that not even people in the highest offices can understand some of this, are able to see part of it. It's just, I'm not holding my breath for to say, to have them come out on stage with a couple of our little gray friends, maybe some tall ones behind them, but or they're, show us the bodies, show us the crash wreckage, different kinds of stuff that went on to really open it up. Even along with what we had recently with the pyramids, all the videos we've been seeing of all these crafts are from sailors or pilots or airmen in the back of the crew or the weapons officers going and taking out their phones and videotaping stuff. And not videotaping it, but just, recording it. Where's all the recordings from the ship equipment? Where's all the information from their sensor logs? Where's all the additional stuff they could go ahead and really go ahead and open it up? They're not showing it. All they're confirming is saying, yes, they're UAPs, and hoping that level of disclosure.
And I think that's where it's going to be. I think that's going to remain there because frankly, there's a very, very small group of people that have been read into the Roswell program. It's so infinitesimal. Usually these are not even elected people.
Yeah.
These are people that are embedded. Generally, they're in Intel. Often they're former Intel, and oftentimes this information and technology resides in the private sector, so it's not even in the purview of government and FOIAs. I don't think a lot of the folks we're talking about, and frankly, Reid, Rubio, I don't think these folks have ever been read into the recovered UFO program. They don't have a need to know, and I think there are two different levels of awareness. The awareness we're talking about with them would be, yes, there are UAPs. They are likely extraterrestrial because they're not ours and they're not our adversaries. But it's a whole other thing to know that we've actually, for 70 years, possessed craft and bodies.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother level. I mean, this is why, it's interesting to me, the videos and the lights in the sky. But when I know in my heart that we actually have the debris, physical evidence of their visiting us, and in fact their bodies, to me that is infinitely more interesting than seeing these unusual craft flitting about. And what do you think they're doing, Tom? Do you think they're observing us? Do you think that they are trying to tease us over decades to their reality?
Well, taking a step back and looking at the big picture in ways that most people don't, which is one of the talents that I have, I've seen an escalation going on. I've seen where we're seeing larger groups of UFOs operating in tactical formations over our major cities in the last 6 months. Meaning we've always had UFO sightings of one or two or a group here or there, but the frequency of how often this is happening, there's a definite escalation going on, which could mean that the disclosure that's about to happen isn't coming because the government has decided, we're going to go ahead and change our minds today and just do this right now. There's something bigger at play that's happening now to that effect. They've been, the government has not liked it when the UFOs have gone over our nuclear bunkers and turned off the missiles in the silos and basically sending a direct message, we don't want this. But you have to take a step back and say, I wonder why they're doing that. Are they worrying about humanity? Well, maybe, but they haven't, aside from taking us and doing experiments and throwing us back into the flock, that's about been their only involvement. The bigger picture here is huge UFOs seen coming out of the oceans, tons of small UFOs going in and out of the oceans on a regular basis. Chances are there's a huge civilization of on-planet entities that are living on planet at this point and have been here potentially longer than man. And if we're getting into a situation where we could be potentially wiping out the planet that's also their planet, and sometimes we want to think that it's our airspaces, our oceans. No, it's their airspace, their oceans. And if we're doing something that puts all that in jeopardy, I don't think they're willing to sit back and allow that to happen. And that may be part of the reason why we're at. But also remember, we just transitioned into the age of Aquarius, which is another golden age. Past golden ages, the rapid advancement, the stuff they've talked about, and the involvement of ETs has been a regular thing. Now, could this be because where the Earth's position is relative to the galactic magnetic sheet that comes from the overall, center of our galaxy that our Earth is just passing through now, that started in 2012? Is that something that is also bringing them back? We don't know, but all I can see and observe is there's more. They're being more blatantly obvious. They're going over major metropolitan areas, and there's something at play that's more than just disclosure. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
It does. I think that there is something going on, and you can just feel it.
Yeah.
But, this has been said over the decades that, we're nearing disclosure. This time, however, I do think there is something different.
Yeah.
I think that we are really getting very close to them meaning the government, to admit that there are craft that we simply don't know their origin.
Yeah.
I think that for them to have said that during the Cold War, or certainly after World War II, the way the world was, I just don't think they could ever have brought themselves to have said that. I think we're at a point in time in our evolution that we can accept that we are likely being visited by folks whose intentions are likely not evil.
Yeah.
And are likely observing us. And more than that, we simply don't know. I think the government may be prepared to talk in that way. I don't think that they are, and many of them don't even know, that we in fact already have their material and their corpses.
Yeah, well, if their ship's crashed, they're going to know. And they're going to have an idea of what happened. And, it's kind of, you have to look at the big picture and think that our governments around the world have been in contact, have been in some level of communication with them. And it's just, the question is, what deals have been made in the past that we're paying for today?
Yeah.
But I'm not sure we're going to get to that point. But
yeah, who in government has been told? And I think that some of these folks that we've talked about, like Harry Reid, are very close to it.
Yeah.
I think they have very strong feelings about it, but he's come out and said that he's not aware of recovered craft. I mean, he has said that, and he has in some, sometimes he talks in very supportive ways about the phenomena, but there's been a couple of other times when, frankly, Reid has said things like little green men, and used other terms that were kind of disparaging.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, and it's kind of like with Bigelow. I mean, sometimes he'll say, now he's saying that he never had the material in his facility.
Have you heard the details about the multi-million dollars they spent to put these facilities underneath the floors of his facilities in Vegas? I mean, they were...
I heard about that, and of course you can view aerial footage of the buildings themselves, which are windowless and really kind of spooky looking.
Yeah, it is.
What I want to know is, exactly 1 year ago, actually, in April of last year, he closed down the doors of Bigelow and laid everybody off. There is no Bigelow Aerospace anymore. And so where is this material? These facilities, do they lie dormant? What is going on? And as taxpayers, we have a right to know.
Right.
And so to me, I mean, he was a defense contractor who got paid taxpayer dollars.
Yeah.
For aerospace research as well as for, I believe, extraterrestrial research. How is it he closed down his doors? It was a small company, about 150 people, maybe less. They used to work on engineering habitats in space.
Yep.
Expandable habitats in space.
Right.
A very wild thing. And just somehow closed the doors and said nothing. And people, I reached out at Bigelow that used to work there through LinkedIn and through calling them. They just don't want to talk about it. He must have made them sign NDAs.
Yeah, of course.
up the wazoo. I mean, it
Yeah.
must have been.
I mean,
for them to just not utter a word.
have you heard about the lawsuit recently that Bigelow's filed against NASA for millions of dollars that were unpaid for his contracts? And if that could be the
No.
case, yeah, that was just in the sheets probably last week or so, and it talked about that Bigelow was basically going and suing NASA because he had completed the scope of the contract and provided all this data and all this information they required, but after the fact they're coming back and wanting all these additional details that may or may not have been collected along the way when they're doing this stuff that aren't specified in any part of the contract or communication. So it's like coming back with after the fact contractual requirements that they're using as a reason not to pay. So if you're a company and you've got millions of dollars that you've been covering to cover everyone's salary and the overhead and all those things, and all of a sudden your line of funding for all of that operation dries up and goes away, something must have been said, something must have happened for them to want to start squeezing Bigelow in the way they are. Now
No kidding, I did not hear about this.
Yeah.
Thanks for telling me about that. It's kind of big news.
Yeah.
It's surprising to me that they would do that to him.
Yeah.
Very surprising. I do know that I tried to reach the former director of security for Bigelow Aerospace, and he does not want to discuss it at all.
Yeah.
As well as the former general counsel for Bigelow, and whose name escapes me, but he was very lawyer-like and would not discuss anything with me, and told me that I would best to be talking to Mr. Bigelow himself.
Yeah.
And I didn't tell him that I tried repeatedly to do that. So yeah, they've got something over on their former employees.
Yeah.
From top to bottom, they just do not discuss their work experience. And even if you look at some of the LinkedIn profiles of some of their engineers, they're very lean profiles.
Right.
And they just don't like to talk much about their work, which is understandable in that they were defense contractors, and it's likely that his engineers held top secret clearances, given the work that they did.
Yeah.
But just very strange that he up and left, and those buildings are deserted. And where this material is now, that was formerly held in his facilities.
Yeah.
In fact, the New York Times called them specially modified facilities.
Right, because it was modified because the stuff that he put down underneath the buildings were put together in such a manner that there was no Earth atmosphere that was breathable to us that was in these facilities, and you had to basically wear a spacesuit to go down and work on whatever was down there, which makes you believe, is it materials or is it biological stuff that's down there if they're going to that level?
That's deep.
Yeah, it is. Because
you had alluded to sending me something along those lines. I look forward to receiving that.
Yeah.
That is an incredible thing, and it wouldn't... I will tell you this, and actually I do have a hard stop here in about a minute or two here, but my attentions now are going to go towards the bodies. I've done enough on the materials.
Yep.
The way that I've backtracked the technical reports on material science and engineering and on memory metal and nitinol, I'm doing the same and have been for the past 2 months.
Yeah.
In fact, I've engaged the assistance of a couple of geneticists and others, and I'm doing the exact same thing I did on the materials with the bodies. There has to be a trail, a technical trail. Yep. So if we look at the biological material, there has to be technical reports that were generated. There had to be involved scientists, much like with the metal and the other materials that were recovered. And I think that we can do a real deep dive on that.
Absolutely.
And, that's kind of what, that's a little bit of a scoop. I suspect that by the year's end, I'm going to have some very interesting information about the bodies.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. And don't let anything that you're hearing, haters will hate, just keep your spirits up and just keep the drive going, because you've delivered so much information on UFOs, going back a very long time. and trying to get disclosure, trying to get to the bottom of this, looking at this from a real deep investigative reporter. And I can tell you from myself and from all of our listeners, we really appreciate that. And more than that, we appreciate you taking your time, which you usually don't do, to come and talk to us today.
Thank you so much, and for the encouraging words. It means a lot to me. And Tom, I hope to be on with you again.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it in the future. Thanks, Tony.
Got it. You got it. Thanks, Tom. Have a good one.
You too.